I am utterly speechless. Welcome to the BMW M 1000 XR test. Sports tourer or shortcut to driving license withdrawal? Find out in this video. Hello and greetings. Nice of you to tune in again. In addition to the BMW F900 GS and the new R1290, I also rode this hot piece here at the big BMW presentation in Andalusia in spring or late winter. You know from the intro that emotions run high on something like this. I'm talking about it right from the start because it's often debated with such extreme bikes. The question of whether it makes sense, and that is quickly answered because yes, no, well no, nobody needs 201 horsepower in a touring bike. But at the same time, people buy the M motorbikes like the M1000RR and the M1000R. And with the R, for example, the latest M model, it's like 50% or so of BMW's sold naked bikes have been the M1000R. And by 2023, even more than 50% of all 1000cc naked bikes sold by BMW will be M models. If I remember correctly, I think 3100 S1000Rs and 3700 M1000Rs were sold. In other words, the interest in these extreme, extravagant, and expensive machines is definitely there, and that somehow gives it a raison d'être. Because if many people want it, then why shouldn't BMW build it? We're not going to clarify in this test today whether it makes sense or not. As I said, I find the question a bit redundant. But BMW says that this is a long-distance sports bike. I myself, that's the next question you might ask. Why am I testing such an extreme bike? I've already mentioned it. We've also tested other bikes, completely different ones here, namely the GS and then the 9T. In other words, I'm a generalist, and for all those who are hoping that the wheelie control will now be used to the maximum and the slide assists will be tried out, I have to disappoint them. Hopefully in the coming season, Martin Bauer will really get to grips with it. But let's take a look at what the M1000 XR does, what it can do, what features it has, and whether it really has at least a little bit of touring in it. Oh, before we start talking about the multitude of equipment options, information, data, advanced rider assistance systems, etc., let's move on to the part that probably interests most people, namely the riding impressions. And let's get straight into the saddle. I'm doing my best here to give a reasonable impression of what's in front of me while I move the M1000 XR as best I can. I've also switched on the sports view in the display, so I can't hide from you what a noob I actually am, especially in the face of the M1000 XR, because yes, of course, I can't ride it to its limits. And I think even so, on the public road with even a modicum of just common sense, yeah, forget it. I never get to the 201 horsepower at 12,050 revs. That's just too far. So even if I ride at 80-90%, which is the maximum I want to do on the public road, then I might scratch the 10,000 revs. At 9 to 10,000, that's when it really takes off again. The power you feel before that is just the intro. You can't just reduce it to the double R engine that's inside it, albeit with its own shift cam mapping, even if the data is of course extremely impressive, 3.2 seconds to 100, 7.4 seconds to 200. Yet, you mustn't forget what's around it, and that's what makes the M1000 XR so impressive for me. So it's not just the power, but how well everything else works. Starting with the fact that we are sitting here on a touring motorbike, as it is on paper, slimmed down to 223 kilograms, as I am riding it here now, with the M competition package, where you also get carbon rims, for example, and carbon this, carbon that. Then with these carbon rims, the handling is incredibly playful. The steering behavior, almost no righting moment, and then there's the extremely powerful brakes. They call it the M. brakes, a 320mm double disc at the front, 4 pistons radial, in other words, the finest quality. And it doesn't need any power on the brakes. So braking into a bend has never been easier. One finger is enough, hardly any force necessary. Even when I brake as hard as I dare, I never ever reach the limit of this braking system. I haven't ridden the forged rims that are in the normal M1000XR without a competition package, so I can't tell the difference. But the way it is here, I don't have any riding moment. It's really perfect. It's so easy to hold the line. Then there's the DDC, the dynamic damping control, which permanently adjusts the damping and rebound of the high-quality suspension. And it works incredibly well. Martin Bauer already praised it in his test. The M1000R said that it leaves almost nothing to be desired. And when Martin Bauer says that, it means something. So bomb chassis, bomb brakes, really good handling, and an otherworldly engine. And that's also important, and that makes the package complete. You shouldn't misunderstand it. It's not a raw bike. It can also be ridden in a relaxed manner. 6th gear is very comfortable, and that's actually amazing, that you get so much performance. More than 99% of people can ever utilize, more than you can use on the public road. And when you want to ride it in a calm manner or you just want to enjoy the scenery, boom. Everything is there. Heated grips, cruise control. The engine runs smoothly. Even the sound in 6th gear, which usually roars and roars, is discreet. So the overall package is what excites me about the M1000XR. And it's not just the massive power. You may have noticed the quick shifter before, but I forgot to mention it, so I will do that now. Wonderfully crisp. Leaves nothing to be desired. That's pretty much the motto of the M1000XR. Riding the M1000XR really is a very special experience. Even among my fellow journalists, there was a recurring pattern, or a reaction to the XR, shaking their heads and looking at it, with a big smile. And then at each other without words. It leaves you speechless. It really is an indescribable riding experience. And not just because of the power. I really want to emphasize that once again. Let's talk ergonomics. Seat height 850 mm. You're very tense on the bike. Straight forwards, backwards. You don't have much room. The bike tells you exactly how to sit. The knee angle, especially with the right foot position, it's quite sporty, but still within the regular range. Fits the bike. What's more, you have freedom of movement. However, not forwards, backwards, but left and right. So I think you could ride it hang-off. I was just hinting at it because hang-off doesn't really belong on the public road, but it would work incredibly well. Above all, because the turn-in behavior is so harmonious, as already mentioned, and it's so easy to turn into the bend. Then the throttle responds quickly. The throttle is also applied extremely cleanly and predictably, at least in the power ranges I've been traveling in. In other words, you have your hands very loosely on the handlebar. And the bike follows its line cleanly, which also helps, especially at these higher lean angles. When applying the throttle, so that you accelerate cleanly, it's the wider rear tire. We now have a 200 rear tire. In comparison, the S1000XR has a 180 tire. And the tires are also really sporty. It comes as standard with Bridgestone Battle Axe RS2. These tires are so sporty. They also take a relatively long time to warm up. That is, especially at the beginning of our riding day, when it was cooler. The roads were quite worn there, maybe a bit dirty. You really had to be careful there. Also the rain. We've just arrived, we're getting a bit of bad weather. You have to be careful with that sort of thing. Once they're warm, they're phenomenal. Now let's talk a little data. What's inside the M1000XR? Basically, it's like a combination of touring features, touring components, and racing features. Racing components. The engine, as I have already mentioned, is from the S1000RR. A lot has been taken over. Just a bit of shift cam mapping, a different one. 201 horsepower at 12,750 revs. Insane. 113 Newton meters at 11,000 revs. They have also shortened the gear ratio a little. The transmission compared to the S1000XR from 4th, 5th, 6th is even shorter, and the rear sprocket has been increased from 45 to 47 teeth. That just means you get a bit more of that power. And the gears are still quite long, for a public road at least. At the top of 2nd gear, you're already riding very illegally. Of course, we also have all kinds of electronics. Rain mode, road mode, dynamic mode. And then we come to the racetrack features, namely Race 1, 2, and 3, but that's really not my speciality, so we interviewed the lead developer of the M1000XR. He can tell us exactly what the systems can and should do. In other words, stay tuned if you find the racetrack features of the M1000XR particularly exciting. What else is inside? We have a 45mm upside-down fork at the front and 138mm suspension travel at the front and rear. I've already mentioned the DDC dynamic damping control. What is the difference to the ESA? With ESA, the preload is also regulated according to the load and the riding condition. Here the preload is manually adjustable, front and rear. And the focus is on regulating the rebound and compression. The shock rebound can even be adjusted practically by hand wheel. The Akrapovic Sports exhaust is standard. Apart from that, all the carbon parts are, as mentioned, also part of the competition package. But these winglets here are also standard, for example. We know them from the M1000R. It also has exactly the same downforce, i.e. 12 kilos at 220 kilometers an hour. Of course, another feature more for the racetrack. But I find it positive. It bothered me a bit on the M1000R that it stands out so much from the silhouette of the bike when you look at it from the front. Here these winglets are much less noticeable. Even at the rear we have something aerodynamic. These are the flaps. They ensure that the air is channeled to the rear as cleanly as possible, so that there is as little turbulence as possible and drag is minimized as a result. M branding everywhere anyway. M seat, M this, M that, levers. All pretty classy even without the M competition package. Electronics galore too. In addition to the riding modes, traction control is also adjustable. BMW calls this DCT. ABS Pro, cornering ABS is of course also multi-adjustable. Quick shifter, of course it has to be there. But then there's another touring feature, such as the Hill Start Assist, HSC, which you usually find on the touring models. Interesting. Heated grips, cruise control, other touring features that are normally included here. So the long distance thing, they claimed they really meant that. TFT display is well known, tire pressure monitoring, keyless ride, adaptive cornering lights. In other words, as I said, it's this mix that makes the difference. And now we're going to flee from the bad weather. In the meantime, you will watch my interview with Dominic Blas, the expert on the M1000XR, and he'll tell you more about the racing features. Dominic, you are the product manager for the M1000XR, among other things. You also have a lot to do with the R. I know a bit about touring myself, but the racing world is foreign to me. Hence my question. I know it's a hybrid of these two worlds. Which technologies have you adopted from the S1000RR? What has found a place here in the MXR? Hello, Gregor. I have to say, we've packed a whole host of features into this bike. Let's start with the suspension. So we also have the DDC here, dynamic damping control. It means that we've managed to create a suspension that adjusts itself with the precision of 1/10 of a millisecond. And there are also different modes, so that it has the right throttle response. And that is one of the absolute highlights. Of course, we have made the suspension for the crossover segment a little higher on the M1000XR. We have 138 millimeters, which is significantly more than on the RR. And we've also packed in all the other racing features we have, like a wheelie control that can be adjusted and configured in Race Pro mode, so that you can do wheelies at 3 different heights. It's an assist, of course. It's for people who already have a certain level. But you can also shift through the gears with the wheelie control. That's really nice. What are we talking about in terms of wheelie heights? Up to 30 degrees. It definitely feels steeper than you might think at the moment. And in the same way, once you've done the wheelie, you want to brake again. Then we have our stoppie control in our brakes. Below 50 kilometers an hour in Race Pro mode, you have the option of going into a stoppie. The M1000R can do that too. And then it protects you from flipping the bike over. That's also something. You need a certain level, but it's great fun. And the last feature, which is also super cool, is simply the brake slide assist. With this, you can really learn to ride into corners at right angles. And it works. You need a few parameters. For example, you have to decelerate at 5 meters per second on the front wheel, decelerate completely on the rear wheel, and then between the engine drag torque control and the rear wheel ABS, it enables a corresponding slide up to a certain angle. And that's great fun, supports you, and that's what makes the M so special. We always do the coolest, newest shit on our M's. And yes, have fun trying it out. For the people who maybe haven't ridden a Supersport bike, S1000RR or something like that, you've mentioned these Race Pro modes several times. There are 3 of them, 1 to 3. What is the difference between these 3? So the 3 are all freely configurable. The cool thing is that you can set all the features we've just talked about, brake slide, assist, all the racetrack features, stoppie or wheelie control, to suit you and your needs. Also the throttle response and so on. And the cool thing is that you also have the TTC shift in the Race Pro modes. This means that you have dynamic traction control and can adjust your traction control again in 14 stages while riding. Can you do that at any time? In Race Pro modes, you can do this at any time using a switch on the handlebars. And accordingly, if you are in a sloping position and you feel too little or too much slip, you can make direct adjustments. Well, I think when Martin Bauer hears that, he'll be so hot that he'll hijack it again. Dominic, thank you very much for your explanations, and we'll switch back to the main moderation. What else is going on with this bike apart from the electronics? Everything is branded with M. I've already said that. That means we have the M levers, M brakes, M endurance chain. We have M forged wheels in the MXR, which is not equipped with the competition package. There are a lot of M's today. We have the M seat, we have M clutch levers, a tinted windscreen. That's all still standard equipment. What I forgot to say before, the Akrapovic rear silencer is made of titanium, which is also important. Saving weight was also important here. I have already mentioned the weight, just for the sake of completeness. The new S1000XR weighs 227 kilos. The new M1000XR without competition weighs 223 kilos. With the competition package, 220 kilos. All the weights are ready to ride. That's absurd. 201 horsepower. 220 kilos in a touring bike. It's intense. Unsurprisingly, we've already established that it can be ridden sportily or not. We've already talked about what she has fitted as standard so that she can accelerate like that. But what about the touring? As I said, a long-distance sports bike. How many end customers will use it for touring is the question. Nevertheless, in contrast to the S1000XR, for example, BMW has decided not to offer any luggage solutions. They don't want you to put any fixed panniers or even, God forbid, a top case on the back. There is a small luggage solution like bags that are strapped on here, a soft luggage solution, but that's what they said. It's designed for a weekend trip, and that's that. What else is important when touring? What about comfort in the saddle? You shouldn't be too picky with your knee angle. As I said, the knee angle is a bit sporty. And besides, you don't really have the option of sliding left and right with your bum and putting weight on one cheek and then the other, because you're so locked into the bike. In other words, it can be a bit of a pain in the long run, but I don't think the seat itself is overly sporty and hard. So yes, you have to be able to suffer a little, but it's okay. How far can you get with it anyway? It has a 20-liter tank, just like the normal S1000XR, and the fuel consumption is only slightly higher than that of its normal sister. BMW claims 6.5 liters per 100 kilometers, compared to 6.2 liters for the S1000XR, so that doesn't make any more difference. And what else is there? Wind protection. Yes, it's rather poor. I think it's cool that you can adjust it a bit, even while riding. With one hand, easy cheesy. I've also used it, but even in a high position, with my 1 meter 85 centimeters of height, I get the wind blown into my face, and it's loud. So you can't expect any spectacular wind protection here. The large proportion of M bikes in terms of sales of the S1000R did surprise me that it's over 50%. But I wasn't surprised how many of these M customers then add the M competition package. I was told that with the R now, i.e. the naked bike variant, it's also around 50%. In other words, you could say that around a quarter of all the liter naked bikes from BMW come with this full carbon paneling, etc. The M competition package on the M1000XR costs $5,500 in the USA. Quite a lot of money. Now what do you get for it? The main feature, at least for me, are the carbon rims, the ultra-light ones. Then you can see it from front to back anyway. Bling, bling, suddenly the white machine is originally black, lots of carbon paneling. Also these M-milled parts, these really elegantly manufactured levers and so on, footrest systems. And with the electronics, the GPS lab trigger is activated when the activation code is given. But that's by no means all the accessories. There are, of course, many more. What optional extras are there? For example, these mirrors. They are optional extras. We have a low sports seat that lowers the seat height to 820 millimeters. We also have a higher sports seat that raises it to 870 millimeters. For the touring riders, we also have the option of adding the familiar BMW sat-nav preparation. The carbon wheels, for example, can also be purchased individually as an optional extra. And last but not least, it probably makes sense to have an anti-theft alarm system for such a classy and expensive vehicle. And if I'm already talking about expensive, then perhaps we can get straight to the price. So take a look there. In the US, the M1000XR without the competition package costs $24,300. With the M competition package, which costs $5,500, the total MSRP grows to $30,500. But as I said, the statistics show that there is definitely a demand for such high-end parts. And now I think it's time to summarize. With all the performance, etc., what I take away the most is actually the reaction of other journalists and all the people who have ridden the M1000XR. Even the BMW guides, when they rode the M1000XR for the first time, was always the same. Shaking their heads, followed by expressions like, "Oh my goodness," or something, people shrugging their shoulders, just these gestures of bewilderment and at the same time joy. Everyone grinned like a child. That's what I take away from the M1000XR. It makes relatively little difference. It will be exciting to see how it performs in the sales statistics, but at the end of the day, of course, a lot of people who have ridden it now would never or could never afford one of these things. But still, if you have a basic interest in sportiness, and you have the opportunity to test ride something like this, go for it. It simply broadens your horizons, regardless of whether you ever consider buying one or not. Are there also points of criticism? My journalist colleagues have also said, well, what more can you say? It just works so well as a concept. The most you can do is look for a fly in the ointment. Personally, I would maybe change the wheels, because especially when you say I don't ride them on the racetrack, but I really take them out on the public road, they're almost a bit too much for me. And I would think something like an S22 or now maybe the new S23 or other really good hyper-touring tires that are out there on the market. They also offer enough performance and still maybe a bit faster warm-up time and a bit better wet performance. And otherwise, yes, have your driving license somehow printed out as a book in tear-off format, because that is, of course, always an extreme danger. The engine drives you to accelerate, and that doesn't sit well with the highway code, if I've forgotten anything else. If you're interested in something specific, please ask me your questions in the comments. And if you liked the video, then maybe give me a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for the tests of the F900 GS and R12 9T, which we also shot. Thanks for watching. Cheers and see you next time.